Before I get into this, I wanted to true back to a couple of my early guiding principles. First, I stand by my earlier statement that who I am should be of no consequence. But I figured it's been 50 episodes in just over a year, so I need to open that door a bit more. I'm a reformed gray hat hacker from the 80s who has been working in corporate IT ever since the original dot-com bubble crashed back in 1999. I specialize mostly in web application and cloud architecture, and occasionally I have opinions about things like endpoint security or development best practices or other stuff I've picked up over the years. Don't look at these opinions as more than stories from unidentifiable moments in the past, just told from the perspective of someone who was there. I'm not here to burn any bridges or spill the tea or anything controversial, except about Java, but that's a story for another time. I also suffer from some pretty debilitating social stuff, like the fact that I can't look at my own face somehow without getting emotional. Hey, I'd explain it if I could. For now, though, Memoji me is right at the limit of where I can push myself. I'm doing more to try and post on social media, offering some perspective and some snark where I can, just kind of make the day more bearable. I'll put all the relevant links on where to follow me and whatnot in the description. Over my career, I've written a little bit of everything there is. It's mostly been web apps, but back when they were all the rage, I did a lot of work on endpoint software. You see, before the internet, as it were, companies used these massively monolithic applications written for very specific purposes. And companies charged a lot of money and enforced licenses for binary code that ran on your machine, like your browser does today for everything else. Now, I'm not ancient, but we are talking about a world not many 25-year-old people are going to understand. And that's the world we have to prepare for. That's part of these stories, is just to kind of help prepare for the future, in a sense. Much less than 25 years ago, 7 years ago in fact, I was tasked almost exclusively with writing what we would call traditionally client applications. The binary runs on the user's machine. And one of these programs interacted with some APIs on Microsoft Exchange. Now, before I get to the really hard part of this, let me state I have no axe to grind with anyone at Microsoft. I follow a lot of current and former employees who post on social media. My first big career success came in 1988 when I was quoted in an article in Microsoft Systems Journal, which was, at least for me at the time, a huge deal. Man, I thought the world was my oyster back then. I even won $500 in free software, and I bought Visual C because I was going to go out there and knock it out of the park with some app that never really materialized. But a few years back, as I'm developing this application, suddenly I hit a wall. Everything looked okay. My API calls were zipping right along. I could see the data, but none of it, not a single element, was getting marshaled back into the XML object I had instantiated. I could throw a mock XML file at it, and it worked all day long. So what the fuck, Microsoft? I should add here, for those unfamiliar with corporate development of an in-house desktop tool, it's a really bad idea, okay? Please listen to that one thing, if nothing else. I'd be happy to explain in a sidebar why I think it's bad for businesses to work this way. It's expensive, and ultimately it can be dangerous, especially if it's not something you actively support. But I digress. So after 2 to 3 full days of making zero progress, religiously checking Stack Overflow, knowing that I didn't have an army of people I could rubber duck my ideas off of who would have any kind of context. I mean, the world doesn't work that way anymore. Unless you work for a software publisher, you're not going to be intimately familiar with some of these things. It's just the way it is in a company like that. So at around 2 o'clock one morning, I finally had my eureka moment. And it involved the dumbest possible resolution. Now, I'm neither defending nor maligning Microsoft's continued insistence on using XML for everything. That's their decision. Yet, even today, in 2024, XML is the preferred format for a lot of stuff, including some of the package definition files used by the Visual Studio Code Editor, written by, who. So what, right? I mean, nobody cares who uses XML. Except strangely, at the time, Microsoft cared a lot about XML. The format, the structure, and most importantly to this story, enforcing the schema. The schema is another XML file that says, here's what your XML response should contain. And Microsoft's framework said, I'm going to use that schema to enforce the rules, which is how it's designed. Except Microsoft also owned the schema and had deleted it. They had deprecated it so that my call that should have worked from the moment I typed it initially had to be modified to remove the schema element to get my XML data to parse into my object correctly to get the problem solved. Now, I really hope that I get a lot of comments from people that say, oh, you dummy, all you had to do was this or that. That's great. The internet didn't get me to that answer back then. And in the moment, I never thought, well, better disable schema enforcement because it's going to throw a 404. I had a dead simple problem. Parse an XML result set without any kind of obvious resolution to getting that done. I mean, hey, shit happens, right? I mean, that's why we do this. If this was easy, this podcast wouldn't even exist, right? So, given my level of frustration in the moment, I penned a series of comments that I'm hopefully going to get scrolling in front of you right now in homage to what I consider some of the big numbskull decisions behind this, at least from my perspective. So before I go, a couple of things. From here out, I'm going to do like a quick intro to these episodes, and then I'm going to do a demo where I don't have to spend as much time on camera. It's just trying it out, just seeing what's easier for me. And I also wanted to talk up Joshua Ray Walker yet again. He's recovered from his cancer ordeal enough to hit the road for a few shows. I'm going to the show this week in Nashville. I hope that I won't be hard to miss. I cannot begin to say enough about him, his music, and the positive impact all of it's had on me. Take care.